In this video, we will go over everything you need to know about cluster jewels, how they work, how to craft them, and how to use them. The way that cluster jewels work is that they can extend the skill tree with a new cluster of nodes. Different jewels can have different notable skills crafted and also a certain amount of jewel sockets that can hold other cluster jewels or even normal jewels. So in a way, they are a self-crafted portion of your skill tree. There are many different versions of cluster jewels, such as the large, medium, and small cluster jewels. There are also other variations of these that have certain craftable notable skills based on the jewel. For example, a lightning damage jewel can have the specific lightning related notable skills crafted onto it. In this case, we have crafted the Storm Drinker notable on this large lightning damage cluster jewel. Also, depending on what cluster jewel you can have a certain amount of passive skills on it overall. Small clusters have 2 to 3 passive skills, whereas up to 1 can be a notable skill, and small cluster jewels cannot have a jewel socket. Medium cluster jewels have 4 to 6 passive skills, whereas up to 2 can be a notable skill, and medium cluster jewels have 1 jewel socket. Large cluster jewels can have 8 to 12 passive skills, whereas up to 3 can be a notable skill. Large cluster jewels have 2 jewel sockets. In Path of Exile, you want to be very conservative with your skill points because they are a big portion of your power. It is therefore quite important to have as few passive skills as possible on your cluster jewels. For your large cluster jewel, the preferred amount of passive skills is 8, which is also the minimum. And since we want to be conservative with our skill points, we leave out the smaller node since it doesn't do much for us. For your medium cluster jewel, 4 or 5 passive skills is preferred because having 5 doesn't actually matter since we don't have to path through it. And for our small cluster jewel, the preferred amount of passive skills is 2. You cannot roll the same notable twice on the same jewel, but having the same notable across multiple jewels does stack. When crafting on cluster jewels, different notables have a higher chance than others to appear, and some notables require a specific item level on the cluster jewel to be able to be crafted to begin with. Therefore, some combinations are harder to acquire than others. I therefore suggest using Craft of Exile or PoE database in order to see which ones are harder to craft yourself before investing a high amount of currency into crafting your own jewels. Cluster jewels work mainly the same as crafting other items in Path of Exile. Cluster jewels crafting are categorized into prefixes and suffixes. You can have a maximum of 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes on each cluster jewel. Certain notable skills are tied to the base item itself and its prefixes. For example, on this Axe and Sword large cluster jewel, we can have Run Through and Blood Scent crafted as our prefixes, while the suffixes mainly host extra stats, or for large cluster jewels, they host a group of notable skills that can be commonly found on multiple cluster jewels. Let's have a look at each cluster jewel and how crafting on them works. On large cluster jewels, you can have 2 prefixes where up to 2 of them can be notable skills. And you can have 2 suffixes where 1 can be a notable skill and the other can be extra stats. On medium cluster jewels, you can have 2 prefixes where up to 2 of them can be notable skills. And you can have 2 suffixes where both can be extra stats. On small cluster jewels, you can have 2 prefixes where up to 1 of them can be a notable skill and 1 can be an extra stat. And you can have 2 suffixes where both can be extra stats. Now, when you've acquired a cluster jewel that you want to use for your character, they work pretty simple. You can slot them into these cluster jewel locations around the skill tree. These locations can hold normal jewels, large, medium, and small clusters. When you socket a cluster jewel into one of these spots, the new portion of your skill tree will appear. You can then apply your skill points in the cluster jewel like you normally would in your tree, and that's basically it. When socketing a medium or small cluster jewel inside a cluster jewel, it works the same way. If you want to take out your cluster jewels from its sockets, it might require you to use some refund points based on how many skill points you allocated in that cluster jewel. Now, if you're looking to learn how to trade for certain cluster jewels, I have another video where I go over different forms of trading through the Path of Exile trade website that you can go check out if you're looking for cluster jewels specifically. Other than that, that is going to be the end of the video. Alright mate, listen up now. I am desperate, mate, desperate for that subscription, alright? Like, smash it, alright mate? Like, I'm turning into another person over here, right? Like, I'm getting all wacky and cuckoo right now because you're not smashing that subscription button, mate. Now go destroy that shit so we can become lads, basically, alright? Just do it. I'm really tired. I want to go to bed, okay? I just want to go to bed. Help me out. Help me sleep.